Honestly, not a lot of home gardeners are thinking like this, and I don't really think that it's your fault. I just think that nobody's really telling you about this. So I want to be here to tell you about it and also model this system in my own garden. I think that gardening this way is healthier for your garden, healthier for you as a person, and healthier for the planet in general. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm talking about biodynamic growing. It's the system of growing where the goal is to create sort of a self-sustaining ecosystem, usually on a farm, where you're bringing in as little as possible as input and instead focusing on continually redistributing resources around your farm. Now, I obviously don't have a whole farm, I just have a backyard garden, but there are a lot of principles of biodynamics that I have been using that I think are really helpful for home gardeners. I also have a lot of limitations on what I can do because I'm renting, but I am trying to make the best decisions that I can. If we're going to look at one of the first things that it would take to become biodynamic certified as a farm, one of the first things mentioned is a section of land that is just left alone to preserve wildlife and biodiversity. Now, this is a little section that I have near my garden. I didn't put this here. This was already here when I started renting. However, it is a nice little patch of trees, and I've got a pile of sticks in here for insect habitat. Farther up there is my compost, and I'm just trying to let this little tiny ecosystem survive nearby to my garden because this is going to harbor a lot of beneficial insects. If you were a farm going for biodynamic certification, you would need at least 10% of your land devoted to wildlife. So speaking of compost, one of the other requirements of biodynamic growing is creating your own fertility. This means using things like livestock manure, green manure, composting to recycle all of those nutrients back into your food growing operation. For me, what I'm doing, you can see the grass clippings in there. Everything from my kitchen gets composted, and all of the dead plants from my garden also get composted. I obviously don't have livestock, and I won't on this rental property, but I do get eggs from my neighbors who have chickens, and I've started collecting chicken manure from them to add to my compost. And additionally, I do collect compost like kitchen scraps from a few of my friends. Something else you can do in a home garden to generate your own fertility is planting of legume crops. As you might know, these are nitrogen fixers, and when used as a cover crop, they actually pull nitrogen out of the air and store it in their roots. And after they die, all of that extra nitrogen is in the soil for whatever you plant there next. The next step you can take, which I think is maybe the hardest for most home gardeners just because they don't really know where to start, is actually ditching the insecticides and moving towards building predator habitats for insects that are going to naturally control your pests. So for example, something major that I do is I do not kill wasps. These that you see lined up along here, I'm not sure why they like this spot so much, are paper wasps. And paper wasps are not super aggressive. You don't really have to worry about them coming at you to sting you, unless you like really disturb them. But they're a great predator for a lot of pests in your garden. They build the nests that look like this, and as long as they're not like directly in your way, if you leave them alone, they actually really won't bother you. I had about like 5 or 6 of them on my porch last year, and I did not get stung once by any of the paper wasps. I did have a problem with yellow jackets. They can be much more aggressive, but paper wasps are different. They're pretty peaceful, and they're just out here eating the things in your garden that you don't want to have in your garden. Also, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I do have a stick pile, which is a good insect habitat over here, especially bees. Actually, there are some ground-dwelling bees that need the soil to be not super covered, and so the sticks keeping vegetation from growing gives them a good little spot to hang out. I also keep some areas of my lawn unmowed. If I don't have to walk over here, this might as well exist as a habitat for insects as well. If you want to learn more ways that you can create habitat for beneficial insects in your yard, I do have a whole video about that, and I will link that up here. The next thing that you can think about as a home gardener is water control via mulch. You'll notice my garden is entirely mulched, some with wood chip and some with straw. And the benefit to this is twofold. First, it is keeping the weeds back, which is nice. But as far as water goes, mulch is really good for holding the moisture in the soil so that you don't have to water as often. And it allows the biodiversity that's right there at the surface to thrive a little bit more, because that first inch or so of soil is so full of life. And if it's constantly getting dried out by the sun, like if you've ever looked at your soil and seen that it looks cracked, there's not going to be any life in that first top inch of soil. And having that life there can make a huge difference in how well your plants grow, and also keeping that mulched and not letting that dry out can make a big difference in how often you actually have to water. I've got this big tall metal roof on my house. Eventually I would love to set up rain catchment of some sort, but again, it's a rental and there's only so much I can do. But catching the rain from your roof and then using that to water your garden is another way that you can conserve water. Rainwater is also just really good for your plants. It tends to be higher in nitrogen. So using rainwater as opposed to your city water is going to help your plants just that little bit more. Now, in a true biodynamic farm, you would have livestock integrated into the growing process. And most home gardeners can't do that, but the idea would be that you are using varied amounts of livestock, getting varied manures, and kind of rotating your animals through the area where you are growing to help self-fertilize it. Things like chickens can also be really great pest control, so you can integrate that into your gardening spaces. And there's just a lot of benefits to having animals integrated in that way on a farm. If you want to check out all of the guidelines for that, since me not having livestock, I can't talk about that much. I'm going to link below the actual certification notes, or I guess requirements, the actual certification requirements for a biodynamic farm below. There's actually only one organization that certifies biodynamic farms because it is not that widespread, unfortunately. But this one organization, they have very comprehensive notes on how to get certified biodynamically, and it can give you a lot of good ideas for how to run your own gardening or farming operation more sustainably. So to some of you, it might be obvious why doing all of these things is better for the environment and better for you. But to some of you, it might not be so obvious. So I'm going to briefly touch on it. First of all, I think that spraying any sort of pesticides on your garden is detrimental to your health as the person consuming that. And I also think that it's detrimental to all of the life in your garden. Insecticides, pesticides are there to kill things, and they are there to kill specific things, but there's always unintended consequences, right? When you are specifically selecting a thing in an ecosystem to kill, there is now a hole in that ecosystem. And usually what we have been doing in Western agriculture is patching that hole with more things that we make. So, for example, if we are killing a pest, then maybe the thing that eats that pest is disappearing because it no longer has good food, or it's eating this poisoned insect that is then poisoning it. And because we're disrupting the ecosystem at that level, there's this ripple effect, right? And in order to make up for it, we will bring in more things externally, like fertilizers, to kind of patch up where the nutrient recycling in the ecosystem is now broken. It's an unfortunate reality that a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we consume these days from the supermarket are much lower in nutrition than they used to be, even just 50 years ago. And that's due to depletion of nutrients in the soil. So if you in your home garden can work on building up those nutrients and maintaining that ecosystem that helps to maintain those nutrients, then your food that you grow is going to be a lot more nutritious for you than something that you just buy at the store. So before we get too deep into that and before I go on a big rant about it, I want to circle back and just reiterate that the reason I'm making this video is because I want you as a home gardener to realize that you have more than one choice. You don't have to buy into the whole buy this fertilizer, buy this pesticide sort of synthetic ecosystem of gardening. My garden that you see in all of the garden tours, I haven't sprayed anything on it. I haven't done any fertilizing aside from the organic rev that I use, which is not really fertilizer. It's really just a dose of beneficial bacteria and good carbon to help build up the fertility of the soil. I haven't sprayed fertilizers or insecticides in I think 4 years now, and I get massive harvests. Of course, sometimes I do have bugs in my garden, and that is a challenge, but I really think that growing without those things is possible and productive. Honestly, with just this spot of garden, there are times when I am absolutely overwhelmed by produce, just giving it away because I have so much. And that's even after I've discarded ones that are, bitten on by insects and the like. So all that being said, again, if you want to learn more about insect habitat, I will leave that video here. And if you want to see how productive my garden is grown this way, I will leave my playlist of garden tours here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.